right, so get this. You ready for something different? Picture those like red lanterns. You know the ones. But instead of like the usual Chinatown, they're glowing against snow. We're looking at some footage and background on Chinese New Year, but celebrated in Russia. It's a crazy mix. You don't see that every day.
Yeah, you don't. It makes you wonder why Moscow? Why now?
Exactly. Our sources actually talk about that. So Minezhnaya Square is all decked out. There are market stalls, people bundled up having fun, even a Russian Christmas tree right next to those red lanterns.
Oh, wow. That Christmas tree with the Chinese New Year stuff is wild. It kind of shows how Russia is with the West and the East right now. Things with the West are not good. So this celebration could be their way of getting closer to China.
It definitely says something. And there's this one thing from the footage I can't get out of my head. These toy bears dressed as astronauts, one for China and one for Russia. What do you think about that?
It's playful, but it's like they're both trying to show their partners in space, maybe even sharing a future up there. Crazy how little details can mean so much.
It makes you look again, right? Okay, so we've got this visually interesting thing happening.
Okay.
But what is Chinese New Year actually all about for people who haven't seen it firsthand? Our sources give a really good explanation of where it comes from and the meaning. Some of it is pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, it's fascinating. Basically, Chinese New Year is all about new beginnings, sweeping away the old and welcoming the new. Like a lot of holidays, it's got all these myths and legends.
Myths and legends. I like where this is going.
So there's this story about nian, this scary beast that would attack villages. To scare it away, people used loud noises, bright lights, and the color red, which explains the fireworks, the lanterns, and just how vibrant everything is.
So that's why they have fireworks. This is what I love about these deep dives. You get those little aha moments.
Right. It's amazing how these old stories still shape what people do today. But beyond the myths, there's a deeper meaning to Chinese New Year. It's a time for families to come together, honoring ancestors and hoping for good luck in the new year.
Yeah, and you see that focus on family a lot in the video. There's this Chinese student, Yuki. She talks about how much she misses her family back home. She couldn't travel this year. And finding this celebration in Moscow is like a bit of home for her.
That's so true. It shows how strong tradition is. Even when you're far away, these customs can make you feel like you belong, like you're part of something bigger than yourself, a history that goes back generations.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. But you also see the other side. There are interviews with Russians who are seeing Chinese New Year for the first time, and they seem really interested. One woman, Natalie Kurpatova, even says she's surprised by the whole thing. It wasn't really on her radar before.
Yeah. That's what's so interesting about Moscow. You've got this mix of the familiar and the unfamiliar, where people are seeing a different culture right in their own city. It's a chance for cultures to mix naturally, not just through books or museums, but through actually doing things together and connecting with each other.
Right. It's like suddenly finding yourself in a whole different world, right in the middle of Moscow. So we've talked about what it looks like and the deeper meaning, but what about the food? Our source mentions some traditional Chinese New Year dishes, and I'm already getting hungry.
Oh yeah, the food. It's not just about eating, it's about symbolism and tradition. Every dish has a special meaning. It makes the celebration even richer.
Okay, tell me more about that. What kind of symbolism are we talking about?
Well, you have dumplings. They symbolize wealth and prosperity. Always a good thing to start the new year with, right? Yeah, and it's not just the shape. Folding them together symbolizes bringing family closer too.
That's so cool. It makes them even more special. What else do they eat?
You've got fish, often a whole one. It represents abundance and having extra for the year ahead. Then there's mordiango. It's like a sticky rice cake, symbolizing progress and growth. Kind of like hoping you'll rise higher in the new year.
I see a pattern here. Food is more than just food. It's like a whole language of hopes and wishes for the future. It makes you think about how our own cultures use food to express stuff, right?
Absolutely. Think about it for a second. What dishes or food traditions are special in your life? What stories or feelings do they bring up?
I love that. Okay, so I have to admit, when I first saw this footage of Chinese New Year in Moscow, I was kind of surprised. I always think of Chinese New Year being in Chinatowns, those busy streets full of shops and restaurants. How common is it to celebrate this outside of China?
It's way more global than you might think. Countries with lots of Chinese people, like Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, they all have their own big Chinese New Year celebrations. Even places like London, Sydney, New York City, they have parades, fireworks, all kinds of stuff.
Wow. So it's not just a small thing, it's a global thing. I wonder, do people outside of China usually do the same traditions, or do they change things to fit their own culture?
It's a mix. You see that in the Moscow footage, right? It's a mix of real Chinese traditions and stuff unique to Russia. It's like they're having a conversation through culture.
Yeah. Speaking of mixing cultures, our source talks about the Chinese zodiac, which is obviously a big part of New Year. And 2025 is the year of the snake rite. What does that even mean for people who don't know about it?
The zodiac is so interesting. Each year has a different animal, each with its own personality. The snake is usually about wisdom, intelligence, and change. People born in the year of the snake are supposed to be insightful, adaptable, and maybe a little mysterious.
Actually, I have a friend born in the year of the snake, and she's totally like that. But I'm curious, in a world that's so connected, why do you think the zodiac still matters to people?
It's a way to understand ourselves and the world right. We all want to find patterns and make sense of things, even something as complicated as who we are or what will happen. The zodiac gives us a way to do that, a way to connect with something bigger.
Yeah, and it connects people across generations, too. I'm thinking about Yu Ki, the student in the video. I wonder if she's thinking about what the year of the snake will be like for her, being so far from home.
That's a good point. And it's not just about personal predictions. The zodiac is part of bigger cultural beliefs and traditions. For example, some animal pairings are supposed to be better together than others, which can even affect things like who people marry in some cultures.
Wow, it goes even deeper than I thought. This whole conversation makes me realize how amazing and complicated culture is, and how these traditions can change and adapt in different places.
Exactly. It's like this living, breathing thing that's always changing and interacting with everything around it. That's what makes it so interesting to study and talk about.
This footage from Moscow has given us so much to think about. We've got the political stuff, the visuals, the food, the zodiac. It's like peeling back layers of an onion.
Yeah, and every layer shows you something new and interesting. It makes you wonder what other surprises are hiding in this simple New Year's celebration.
I love that you're curious. But before we get into any more layers, I got to ask you about something I noticed in the footage. It's how the Chinese New Year market is right next to the Kremlin. What do you think about that in terms of what it means and how the cultures are interacting?
That's a great observation. It's a powerful image, right? The Kremlin is all about Russian power and history, and it's right there with this vibrant celebration of Chinese culture. It says a lot about how their relationship is changing.
It feels very intentional, like they're making a statement about their partnership, especially with how things are with the West right now.
Right. And it shows that this partnership isn't just about politics or money, it's about culture too. Events like this Chinese New Year thing are a visual reminder of that connection. It's a way for both countries to show off their culture, build relationships, and maybe even send a message to the rest of the world.
Like they're saying, hey, we're doing our own thing.
Okay.
And culture is a big part of that. It's a bold statement.
Definitely. And it brings up a lot of questions about the future of cultures mixing globally. As the world gets more connected, will we see more of these unique collaborations and traditions blending together? What will that mean for how we understand our own cultures?
Those are big questions. And they remind us that culture isn't stuck in the past. It's always changing, adapting, and mixing with other cultures.
You're right. It's a dynamic process we're all part of, whether we know it or not. And that's what makes it so fascinating to study and talk about.
Okay, I'm ready to wrap up this awesome deep dive into Chinese New Year in Moscow. But before we go, I want to bring it back to you, the listener. Imagine you're standing in Minezhnaya Square. The snow is crunching under your feet. You smell unfamiliar spices in the air. The dragon dancers are swirling all around you. What stands out to you? Is it the colors or all the little details in the decorations? Or maybe it's hearing Mandarin and Russian together. Do you want to try the dumplings? Or learn more about that dragon dance?
I bet it would be overwhelming, but in a good way. So many new things to see, hear, and smell. It makes you wonder what those Russians who are seeing it all for the first time are thinking. Are they curious or overwhelmed? Do they want to learn more?
Yeah. If you could ask one of those people in the video a question, what would it be? Would you ask Yuki what it's like to find this piece of home so far away? Or maybe talk to one of the Russians and see if this whole thing changed how they see China or Chinese culture.
I wonder if seeing this makes them more interested in learning about Chinese culture beyond just the celebration. Does it make them want to travel to China someday? Or try more Chinese food? Or even learn a few words in Mandarin?
It's amazing how one event can open up so many possibilities. And that's what makes these deep dives so great. It's not just about learning stuff. It's about understanding the world better and getting curious to learn even more.
I agree. As we finish up today, I want to leave you with one last thing to think about. We talked about how Chinese New Year is celebrated all over the world. But as the world gets more and more connected, how might traditions like this keep changing? Will we see different cultures blending together, creating new kinds of celebrations? Or will people try to keep traditions the same way they've always been?
That's a great question, and there's no easy answer. But it makes you think about what's next for how cultures interact, right? What will technology do to the way we experience and share traditions? Will virtual reality let us go to celebrations on the other side of the planet?
Who knows? There are so many possibilities. But the most important thing is to approach other cultures with curiosity, respect, and an open mind, whether it's Chinese New Year in Moscow or something else closer to home. The key is to get involved, ask questions, and be open to being surprised by how amazing and different people are.
Well said. And on that note, it's time to say goodbye. Until next time, keep those deep dive minds going. And remember, you never know where curiosity will take you.